All right, everybody. Today, I welcome Rich Fettke to the podcast. Rich, if you don't already know that name, is the co-founder of the Real Wealth Network. That is one of the leading connectors, if you will, between people offering investment style properties to a diverse group of investors. In addition to him being the founder, he is married to Kati Fettke, who is one of the hosts of the Bigger Pockets podcast. And Rich is very, very well known for being an author of numerous books, most recently Scaling Smart. He wrote with his wife, Kati, but he's also an author of The Wise Investor, Extreme Success. These are very, very well known personal coaching books and real estate investment books. Rich is an all-round amazing person. If you haven't had the pleasure of seeing him at any of the big conferences around the nation, the Bigger Pockets, the IMN, SFR conferences, Limitless, just to name a few, he's always on stage. All the big hitters know him. He is an absolute font of real estate knowledge. And all round, Rich is actually one of the most coolest people that you're going to come across from start to finish. So just enjoy the next hour. You're going to get so many tips and just listen to how a major operator lives his life, runs his life. I'm excited. So without further ado, let's bring on Rich Fettke. Rich Fettke, it is a pleasure, a sincere pleasure to welcome you to our Burn Your Boats podcast today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Rich, despite the fact that, you're in the hills just above Malibu, I really respect the fact that you've been able to show up here. Just before we started recording, everybody, Rich had no power. He was working off a solar battery that I believe had just run out. And he had recently connected to Starlink to get his internet, and he still showed up. He still showed up for this recording. So,
of course,
Rich,
couldn't miss this.
How are you doing, given all of the stresses and strains with the Palisades fire and all the other fires raging around you? How are you doing as we get started? I want to respect that.
I'm doing okay considering. Yeah, it is a emotional roller coaster from seeing the flames come over the canyon, the adrenaline that comes from that. Just a few weeks ago, we had the Franklin fire that came all the way right up to our house. And I stayed overnight for that. I set my watch alarm for every hour. So I'd go to bed, sleep for an hour, and my alarm would go off. I'd wake up, look out the window and see how close the fires were getting. And then by 5 a.m. in that fire, it was go time. Had to get out there and work with the firefighters, and who were amazing. Those firefighters, man, they're awesome. The hot shots came in, they cleared our path. They came in with bulldozers and plowed a 100-foot wide clearance across our whole house, between our house and the canyon. But this one, the Palisades fire is just crazy. The devastation, and man, like our daughter Krista went to Malibu High, and she's got over 20 friends who've lost their homes. So,
oh my gosh,
just that, it hits home.
What are you seeing, Rich, in terms of like the community? Are you seeing people kind of coming together? It's times like this, sometimes it's such a devastation, but it's great to see people coming together. Is that the case where you're at right now?
100% people coming together. We're up in one of the canyons called Corral Canyon, and up here we have a volunteer fire department, and we all have these radios, Corral Canyon radios, and so we leave those on 24/7 and just tuning in. And even last night is arson watch, because I think you guys probably heard that some of these fires have been started by arsonists, which is ridiculous. So there's this watch about, even at like 2 a.m, someone will come on the radio saying, hey, I just saw a car go up to the upper canyon where there's no homes. And so they'd send up someone to find out what's going on. So yeah, it's been a cool coming together. And because our house is perched on a hill and we can see the fire coming, we've had neighbors come and stay overnight here because they're on the other side of the ridge. David, you've been here before. So on the other side of the ridge where they can't see the fires coming. So had them stay overnight, and it's a bonding experience, no doubt.
Yeah, that's what life really, it teaches you a lot. If ever you're cynical about the world, or you're watching the news, or you're having people tell you that we are, at each other's throats for one reason or another, it's just actually not true in the real world. In the
It's
real
not true.
world, when a community is challenged, I think it's one of the things that hit me most during our experience with two back-to-back storms recently
Right.
is just that camaraderie in the community where like there were oak trees down on every single street. There were trees down on old retired people's houses. They didn't have the money to get these emergency tree guys out there who were, bilking everybody and whatnot. And it was just amazing to see the neighborhood coming together to, get those trees off those people's houses. And ironically enough, is that in my neighborhood, all of these landscapers showed up. They're just working for free, clearing the roads.
Oh,
Landscapers
yeah.
just on their own backs.
Yeah.
Really, really emotional. And I got to tell you, it's my whole neighborhood is way closer now than it was before these storms. So when people say, "That's
Totally.
it, I'm leaving," I challenge them to leave in the face of that level of camaraderie. But I really, really want to thank you, Rich. I know how emotional it is when, the neighborhood's getting torn up like that, and
Yeah,
and
you know it well.
how hard it's going to be to elevate your mood maybe for this conversation. But that the fact remains is that you're a pretty stoic person, and
Mm,
if anything, that maybe I think against that backdrop, we can kind of dig into a little bit about what you are, who you are, what you have, just scratched the very surface of what you've done in your life. Rich, you are the founder of Real Wealth Network, one of the leading real estate platforms in the United States. You and your wife are extremely well known in the bigger pockets world. Your
mm.
wife is obviously Kathy Fettke, who's on the Bigger Pockets podcast. Every time I turn it on, she's there.
Yep.
Um,
He's the OG.
you yourself and Kathy have two of the most popular real estate podcasts in the United States. You're you're a ridiculously successful business author, and I know your kids. They're amazing. I love both of your kids, and you guys, yourself and Kathy, have done so much together. That's where
Mm.
we wanted to start off today, and I've just scratched the surface because we got some more accolades for you as we go on further. But one of the first questions we wanted to ask you was everything you've done, Rich, that I can see. Obviously, you're a very, very well-known business coach as well, and I know that you were doing that maybe prior to getting into real estate full time. So we'll scratch
Right.
on that as well. But you've worked with Kathy now for how many years?
Oh man, I mean, we've had the business since 2003, so 22 years now, and Kathy and I have been together for 30 years, and we've been married for 28 coming up here on January 19th.
You better have something big planned for 2 years from now, young man.
Yeah, oh yeah, of course.
You better. I want to know what those plans are. But one of the first questions we wanted to hit up today, because so I think it lays the foundation for everything that we're going to talk about. What do you think are the successful attributes for somebody like you and somebody like Kathy? And you're very different people. I know you both. I
That's
think I'm
true.
honored to say I know you both pretty well. What are
Very
the
well.
different attributes that you share together and also that separate you? And how did that dynamic work for you guys who have worked together for 22 years so successfully? Can you just lean into that just a little bit and give us a little opening as to what do you think are the most important parts of having a successful business relationship with your wife?
Ooh, yeah, that's a big one. I'm going to start with finding the right person is huge. I think we were the right person for each other. We met in a personal development workshop 30 years ago. In that, you get very real about what are your inner gremlins, what holds you back, what are the programs that are running you, and so we got close right away. Her knowing me fully, and me fully knowing her right away. So I think that's a huge one, is that openness, vulnerability with each other. So that really created a strong partnership to support each other. And then after that, it is bringing different strengths to the table. You know, for me, I'm a system creator. I'm all about discipline, continuous growth. And Kathy's very much the visionary. She's big ideas. She's a deal maker. She's amazing on camera or behind a radio mic, all that stuff. So she brings that talent, or in front of a room. So I think bringing that together, her outgoingness, her entrepreneurship, her big ideas, with my ability to kind of harness that, if you will, which is not an easy thing to do with Kathy Fettke.
Yeah.
But kind of create that and implement and put those systems in place, and to lead a team, which, our team at Real Wealth is about 25 employees. Those are the strengths I bring to the table. So I think that bringing those things together has really helped us grow Real Wealth into what it is now.
To provide a little bit of backdrop to this meeting in person at this time, you were a well-known, very, very successful business coach at that time. You were a published author at that time, and you were a semi-professional bodybuilder at that time, Rich. And I've seen those
Before
videos.
that, yes.
Before that. This is back in did you have the mullet at that time, Rich? Yes or no?
Not when I met her. No, the mullet
Well,
was gone. But yeah, I did have the raging mullet back in the day, back in the late 80s, early 90s. So it was
We've got to track down that photo for the YouTube podcast.
I've got it.
Man, yeah.
I've got it saved. Don't you worry about that.
Oh gosh.
But what a difference. I want the reason I'm digging into this is that you've been on tens of thousands of hours of calls with investors, as have I. And
Right.
it's amazing what a superpower it is when your spouse is 100% behind you, even when they're wrong. Even when they're wrong, that you are able to take that risk, and you're able to put your own, I think this is the right way to go, or I think this is the wrong way to go. And I want to investigate just for a minute before we get into, we're going to talk about Real Wealth Network, and we're going to talk about the things that we need to talk about. But you have, from what I've seen, I think your guys' superpower is that you always have each other's backs, no matter what. And can you tell me how that works in real life? Because I know it's not like, oh yes, I've got a bonkers plan, I'd like to do it. Of course, love, go ahead. I know it doesn't work like that. So how do you guys come to that equilibrium when there is something, it is big, it's risky, it might, because you guys have not shied away from risk. Even the house you're sitting in right now, I've talked to you about how even that all came about. How do you guys balance that visionary, that running a million miles an hour, or that Kathy's brain kind of goes at, and then you're methodical, well, how are we going to do this? Because that can be quite a stressor, quite frankly, in business and in, I can't imagine, in a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, you said something about even when your spouse is wrong, it's often me who's the one who's wrong. So what I've learned in that is to be curious. That was my personal quality that I worked on last year. I'm going to carry it forward into this year. Being curious. So when Kathy comes to me with an idea in the past, a lot of times because she was so overly optimistic of this is going to work, we want to do this deal or whatever it was, sometimes she would just go and take action and do it without involving me. And then some of those deals went great. Some of those deals didn't go well. And there was some discussions around that. So now Kathy realizes that, for me, it's being curious about, oh, tell me more about it. Can you give me some more information? Instead of just saying no or starting to look for what the problems might be, which I used to do. I used to come from that place of like, she'd come and say, hey, this is a great deal. I think we should do it. And I'm like, well, I don't know about that area or this. And I'd look for the negative parts of it. Now I've learned to just ask questions about, cool, tell me about it. How's it going to work out? What kind of returns? Or how is this area growing, or whatever it might be? So on that side of things, for me, that's made things way better, is by just asking questions, being curious, as opposed to coming off with an instant defense or saying why it wouldn't work. And that's worked well. And flip that over on Kathy's side, she's learned that I need at least 24 hours to do some fact checking, to do some research. Whereas before she would come to me and say, hey, let's do this. And she would expect me to say, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Now she's like, hey, let's do this. Here's some of the numbers. Here's some information. She'll email me, some spreadsheets, a pro forma, whatever. And then she'll give me 24, 48 hours to do my own research and come up with questions. And that's worked really well. It's like, for me, it's like, thank you, Kathy, for letting me do this research. And then sometimes I'll come back to her and say, hey, here's the research I did. Here's some of the things that we need to look into more. And sometimes she's been like, oh, wow, I didn't even think about that. Oh, we better not do this deal. And then sometimes we find out the facts and we're like, oh, this is good. So it's about being aligned and giving each other the space that we need to be able to make a decision.
Rich, I feel like that there's been some evolution over the last 20, 25 years, and maybe that answer that you just gave may not have been given back in 2004 in terms of being able to like learn each other. And, selfishly, I'm in the same process, right? Like I used to own businesses with my ex-wife, and I say ex-wife because we're no longer married. And I think that we certainly face some challenges as to where our visions were aligned. And sometimes it's hard early on because you're not just like, well, what's your vision? What's your vision? It's the same, be successful, do this, do that, make a lot of money, right? And then you kind of get into the nuts and bolts as you evolve as a couple, as a business. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, this is not, you're not seeing eye to eye. And so I see you and Kathy together as such a unstoppable force. And I know there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that you have to make sure that you're aligned with how you work together, or it's not going to work, right? I know a lot of people listening may work with their spouse or are thinking about it, or at least want their spouse to be supportive of what they do because, when you're running a business, when you're investing in a real estate, you're taking risks, right? Like you're doing things that most people probably aren't doing. And
Right.
so I'm interested to see, as you've talked to so many investors and you've had a peek behind the curtain on so many different investors through Real Wealth, what were some of the things maybe that you saw that maybe were red flags that people should look out for, or maybe they should take a step back and count to 10 before they move forward? I'm just curious to maybe some things on the other side that you're like, maybe you guys need to think about this a little bit further before jumping into a deal together or buying that next property.
100%. Yeah. Kathy and I have led a couples retreats here in Malibu, and we actually spoke at Bigger Pockets conference last year on investing with your spouse or running a business with your spouse. So we've learned some hard lessons over the years, and our goal is to carry those lessons forward to other couples. One of the biggest things that I think is key is making sure that you do have an aligned, compelling vision together. What we found with so many couples is they have different visions and they haven't shared their visions about what they see in the future for themselves, especially if everything turns out the right way. So what we have couples do in our couples retreats is both of them sit down. They each have a note, post-it notes, one of those little pads of post-it notes. And we say, okay, I want you to write down what you see for yourself in the future. If everything turns out just right, for your 10-year vision. So where do you see your life in 10 years and on these 10 areas of your life? So we use that life wheel that I think you guys have probably seen before, that has career, it has finances, it has your physical environment like your home, your cars, it has family, friends, community, fun and recreation, spirituality. So we have couples go around on their own and fill out their 10-year vision about what does things look like in the future, 10 years in the future for finances? What do things look like for career? What about your family? What do you see in 10 years for your family? What about fun, recreation, travel? And they write everything down, and then about 45 minutes it takes to do that. And then we say, okay, now come together and share this with each other. And it's amazing. Most couples, they'll share, it'll be aligned on usually like 60, 70% of that. They're very aligned. But usually 30% of that, 40% of that, they'll look and say like, oh, wow, I didn't know you wanted that. I didn't know this is where you want to be. And then they'll take those Post-it notes, they'll group them together. And then from there, they'll write out a vision a combined compelling vision that they both share. So they both get aligned around it. Like if one spouse says on their vision, I want to move to Alaska, and the other one's like, I want to move to Florida, they're gonna have to talk that out and figure out how it's gonna work. Can they have two homes, or how can they compromise? But when they have that aligned, compelling vision and they have it down in writing, then they're just like they become unstoppable, because then they're kind of like rowing the boat in the same direction, and they're not pushing against or pulling apart each other. So that's one of the big ones, Clark. I think it's just like starting with that, make sure that you're aligned on your vision. And then once you get clear on the vision, then you can come up with the game plan.
Love it.
I feel like terminating this episode right now and going talking to my wife. We've got stuff to work on. That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. Like I've taken a visionary journey when you were hosting it at one of our masterminds, and it profoundly changed my life. Really, really made me think hard about some things and discuss those with my wife. But I've never actually asked her to sit down and do the same thing. And I just want to get back for 1 second what you just said about, when Kathy comes to you with an idea. We had Kathy on the podcast some time ago, and Kathy said whenever somebody is pushing against something, they're saying no, they have an inkling that they want to do something, but they're pushing against. It's usually because they need more information. They need more information. And so what you just said about your resolving, and that Kathy now gives you, 24 hours for you to find out more information. And then when you find that information, bring that information back to her, and then she's just like, oh, no, of course we won't do that. That's crazy. They're building a nuclear power plant just down the street, because now you have more information. I want the listeners to take that away as well. And sitting down with your spouse and mapping out a 10-year vision. And I think it's very important to do so. Do you have something like that online where you've narrated this anywhere, Rich? Because it's super powerful. It helped me greatly. Do you have that anywhere?
Not that comes to mind. I know that Bigger Pockets recorded our session, but I'm just not sure how it asks people to access those.
I think if you could do humanity a favor, maybe, and someday sit down with that super calming voice of yours and just set it up for 45 minutes. Ask yourself the questions and do that, essentially that experiment. I don't think we have to be in person to do that together. I think, listening to your voice, and Catherine and I, let's say my wife, answering those questions and then comparing notes at the end would be, in itself very, very useful.
I recorded that future self visualization that I walked you through, and some others, where you get to meet yourself in the future 10 years out. That is available. That's at for the webpage for my book, for the Wise Investor book. If people go to realwealth.com/grow, GROW, realwealth.com/grow, there is a free, it's like a 10-minute visualization in my voice that I recorded that walks you through the process. So you actually get to go into the future and meet your future self, see where they live, ask them some questions. So that might be a good one for your listeners.
We'll make sure to include that in the show notes for today's episode, Rich. Rich, you've spoken to thousands and thousands of investors, and so has Kathy. And you can quite frankly see the difference between what is like within the first couple of minutes. It kind of like if somebody, speaks Spanish to you. Let's say you're a Spanish speaker and somebody comes up and starts speaking Spanish to you. It doesn't take very long for you to analyze, are they fluent? Are they somewhat fluent? Are they not fluent? Have they just begun Spanish? And so, you've been in this business for, 20 odd years. And so, instantly when you meet somebody. Can you tell me, because one of the things I've realized as I get older in real estate, and as you've become older and more successful, and Clark has, we almost take on this therapeutic role when people ask us for advice about real estate. We think, it's not really about how you buy your first deal. It's not really about how you fund it, or what color paint to use. That information's out there. Most of it's in the mind. Can you tell me 2 to 3 attributes that you see as being like just leading indicators of people who are going to be successful, and equally 2 to 3 attributes of people that right away they're going to fail?
Absolutely. Sure. I'm going to start with the knowing what you want is a lot of investors who are coming in and just like, I just want to make more money. And so it's like, oh, how do you want to do that? And like, how much money? Is it cash flow now or is it long-term wealth? And so that's one. It's like when people have clarity, like just like the Spanish analogy, it's kind of like when they say, oh yeah, I'm a buy and hold investor. I think in a 10-year window. I'm thinking, where am I going to be in 10 years? As opposed to someone else who comes in saying, yeah, I'm really trying to increase my cash flow to make this monthly cash flow so I can have financial freedom, so I can be job optional. It's a whole different set of goals and desires and a different way to get there, right? And it's like you're going to have a different investing approach if you're looking for financial freedom today or within the next couple of years, as opposed to someone who is more about building long-term wealth and they say, I want to have a $10 million net worth in this many years. So that's one that I've seen. On the flip side of that, the people who don't seem to really succeed with investing or know what they're doing are the people who are so risk averse that they're afraid to make anything. They ask the questions about, well, what happens if your property goes vacant for a month or two, or what happens if your toilet breaks in the middle of the night, or all this stuff. So
Yeah.
I've seen those are the investors who have always played it safe. A lot of times they are the ones who are invested in an index fund or mutual funds, and nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
We do the same thing,
Yeah.
but it's like their focus has been there. And then the last point on that, I would say, is the people who get so upset when one of their investments is not doing what they expected it to or what they hoped for. They might have a month where where property goes vacant, or sometimes 2 months, and then they start to freak out, or they lose, they lose 5% of their money on their return and they get all freaked out. But then on the flip side, one of their stocks can go down to zero valuation and they're like, oh, well, that's just the stock market. So it's kind of like a really interesting one there, where a lot of times when people invest in real estate, they're just not willing to have any risk or have any loss, instead of thinking big picture, where it's like, oh, okay, 90% of the time I'm going to make a financial gain. There is going to be 10% where I'm going to have some losses, So I think an experienced investor will be like, oh yeah, well, we took a loss there, but look what happened over here.
Rich, I like what you said about clarity. And it's interesting that, investing in real estate or investing in general, right? It forces you to not go buy the new car. Maybe you're not eating at the nicest steak dinner place, right? It takes delayed gratification. And so it's
Hmm.
hard. Like it's not easy. That's why not everyone's a millionaire real estate investor or whatever they invest in. And so if you're not clear with your vision, right, then it feels like it makes it harder to invest because you don't really know why. Why am I investing? Why am I buying this property in this area? And if you don't have that clear vision, it's harder because you don't understand what's the next step per se. So I'm kind of like taking notes over here because it's so important to say, okay, why do I want to be worth $10 million in 10 years? Like why? Why do I care? What am I going to
It's
do with that? Like
huge, yeah.
where's is it because I want to have freedom? I want to be able to travel? Do I want to have more time with the kids? Do I want to have more time with my wife, my family, whatever that is? And so if you can work backwards from that, now I'm like, okay, I'm going to buy this rental property that makes $58 a month on a good month, right? But it's like, if you don't have a clear vision, then it's like, why would you want to buy something that only makes $58 a month when you're putting $60,000 down, right? But if you have the
Right.
vision in place, it's much bigger than that. So when that rental goes vacant for 2 months, you're like, oh, it's not a big deal because it's just step one of 15 steps to get to that $10 million worth. So I felt it hit home when you said that. And so many investors, I think, are not working backwards from their kind of their vivid vision. And they're just looking at it and they don't know where they are. And they're just a chicken with their head cut off. And guess what? Eventually, they're just going to fall by the wayside. They're going to stop. They're going to get discouraged. And they're going to say, oh, those real estate guys are idiots because my tenant didn't pay for a month. But it's not about the tenant not paying for the month. It's because they didn't have the bigger picture already lined up with the work that needed to be done.
Yeah, that's the first part of our book, Scaling Smart, is let's talk about you. And it
Yeah.
starts with that. And it's like, what do you want? And it goes beyond that, because most people, it's not just their vision. There's other people involved, and that you have to consider those people. So Kathy and I were on our book tour, and we were in Texas, in Dallas, and We went to a bookstore event, and one of the people who came to the event, we sat down with after, and we said, tell us, where do you want to be in the future? What's your goal? And he goes, I want to have $100 million portfolio. And I said, cool. Why? He goes, well, because, it's like I was listening to this one, he's a guru, and he was saying that you don't think, most people don't think big enough. They don't dream big enough. And he goes, so $100 million portfolio is what I want. And we said, what would that get you? And he's thinking about it. And he's like, well, like more freedom of time to be with my family. And then Kathy said, does your family want that? And he goes, ooh, I don't know. And it's like, so many people can justify their vision saying like, oh, I want this. I want $100 million portfolio, but they don't involve their spouse or their kids saying, hey, this is to get there. I'm going to have to really be putting in some extra hours and some extra focus. And are you good with that? So it's like he reset his vision.
Man.
He's like, yeah, I guess I don't need $100 million portfolio. Like, yeah.
Yeah, we just recorded our very last episode is when is enough enough?
Yeah.
We came to the conclusion that, if enough is a very particular financial milestone, 10 million, 20 million, whatever it might be, enough is when it starts to impact your life. That's when enough is,
Yeah.
Make some
I
smart
love that.
decisions. But when it's just when it becomes unsustainable, that's when enough is enough. It's like it's enough for you. What's enough for me might be different, and that's what I want to. We're going to get into scaling smart because I know you circa 10 years. You could not have written Scaling Smart 10 years ago. You certainly
No.
couldn't have written it 10 years or 20 years ago. And
Right.
so I want to just walk a little bit through we're going to talk about scaling smart, but we're going to talk a little bit about the lessons in scaling smart are lessons that you've learned in hindsight. You've been in the
Right.
mess. You've been in the muddle. You've been in the mud, rolling around with mud in your hair, and you're just having a shit old time of things, right? And so we've all
Right.
the reason you've written this book is because you have lived the chaos and the mayhem of and you're best in class. Can you imagine the amount of people who were in way much more mayhem than you and Kathy ever were? But in any business, they can descend into a certain amount of mayhem until you've got wild horses on your hands here, but you have to learn to tame them. You have to learn what does each horse need? And one of the things that I have always respected about you, you would walk into these rooms and your business leadership and the amount of time that you've taken to educate yourself, to get yourself out of the mud. Can we start the first few years of Real Wealth Network? Okay. You have this wild horse on your hand in that it is growing exponentially. You are one of the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies for whatever, how many years that was in a row.
Yeah,
Rich.
3 years in a row. That was pretty amazing.
I had a front row seat of it. Can you tell me a little bit about what not to do? And then we'll talk about scaling smart, which is what to do. So tell me what was going on and how did you get out of it?
What was going on was we had made it to that $1 million mark that
Yep.
so many businesses don't hit. And we're like, we did it. We hit the $1 million in revenue. This is years ago, early. And then the next year we came in right about 1 million. And so we said we need to work harder. So we worked harder. And the next year we came in right about 1 million. And we're like, what is going on here? So we actually signed up for this weekend program. It was called the Elite Forum. Kathy and I went to it together, and it was from the CEO and the co-founders of a 500-person company, a software company, and they brought these lessons to us about, where are you? How can you scale? And so that was our initial thing. It was like doing that research. It was learning about it, figuring that we don't have this figured out because we've hit the ceiling. And what we learned in that, they said, okay, we want you to write down your current organizational chart. Who's in your company, what positions, and what does it look like? Who reports to who? And Kathy and I created this org chart, and it took us probably 90 minutes to write it all out. But in all these different boxes, there was Kathy, Rich, Kathy, you know, and then we had a couple of our employees in there. So we were trying to do all the different jobs in our company. Sometimes Kathy was doing the same job I was doing, would be stepping on each other's toes.
Yep.
So what we did there, and then they said, okay, now that you've got that, now we want you to create your org chart for 3 years from today. If you could design your company perfectly, what would it look like? And you talked about having, the boxes with marketing and sales and finance and operations and all. So we laid out an org chart, and then we said, what is it that we do best? What's our unique strengths? And we put ourselves in those positions that we're really good at. Kathy being a podcast host, me with the systems and the team leadership and all that. And then in those different slots that used to have our names in them, then we put when we were going to hire that next person. So I put, Q2 of 2014, we might put that down, next one's going to be Q4 of 2014. We're going to hire this person. And then we started to hire to that. And so we started to have an organized system, a structure for our business where we had clear reporting, clear accountability, people we were hiring who had those unique strengths instead of us trying to do it all. And so that was game changer number one for us. And that's when things started to run smoother. We started to hire the right people who had great talents in their area. And then we broke through and we almost doubled our business growth the next year doing that. So that was just one example.
Rich, when you were writing in, Q2 in 2014, the marketing box or whatever it is, right? A lot of entrepreneurs have similar goals where they're like, I want to scale, right? But I don't have the revenue, right? And so it's always is it a chicken the egg? Is it the revenue that comes first? And you're working yourself and you're working nights and you're working weekends you're busting at the seams. And then you're like, okay, Q2, we're hiring that person because we'll have the revenue. Or is it the opposite where it's like, okay, I need to have someone in place to then be able to grow the revenue, and we just can't do it because we're bumping our head against the ceiling. And I think that it's a common challenge that we all have as entrepreneurs trying to grow the company. When you and Kathy were filling that out, what did that discussion sound like when you were writing in that box? Was it because you were going to do so much revenue, or was it because you knew that you were missing out on revenue because you guys were both kind of in that same box?
Great one. I love that. It's a really good note. It's like two answers to it. One is I see hiring someone as an investment. It's just like buying an investment property. You're putting the money up front and you're hoping that you're going to get a return on your investment later. And so when it comes to that, we started small, and the first thing we did was he hired an executive assistant that could handle a lot of the miscellaneous tasks that were holding us back from doing what we do well. And we're like, if we hire this person, it's going to cost us a little bit of money up front. But it's going to free us up, to Kathy to do more podcasts, Kathy to get out there more, me to focus more on the team management and making sure that we're aligned as a team, that we are setting the right goals and all that stuff. So that helped really well. And then on the other side of things, if you don't have the funds, which we didn't, it was kind of a stretch. We're like, we're going to tap into our reserves a little bit to hire this person, and hopefully we'll get that return on investment, which luckily it's worked out really well with the hires. I always look at someone and say, if we hire this person, are they going to be able to at least triple their salary as far as return on investment? That's the minimum. Usually we look for like more of a 5 to 7x on their salary. But if you look at that, and you kind of do the math and you say, if we hire this person, how will this work out where we can, if we're going to be paying them, say 40 grand a year, how can we bring in 120 grand a year because of this? So you have to answer that question. And then what we do is, and we still do this today, is we do profit sharing for our whole company. So the better the company does, the better everyone does. So that way we don't have to pay the big fat salary up front. We're not committed to this huge monthly nut. We're just saying, here's your salary and here's the upside. If we hit these goals, we share our profits, and with our profit sharing, you'll be making this much if we hit our goals. And people will look at that and they'll say like, oh, so we only hire people who are entrepreneurial. That's one of our guiding principles. We are entrepreneurial as a company. So we don't do these, say like, oh yeah, you're going to make 200 grand a year no matter what you do. It's like, we're going to pay you $100,000, but you can also make another 150,000 in profit sharing. So it's how you structure it.
That's really important. Know that you have a fully remote company, and dare I say, you're one of the leading companies to do that very, very early on.
Mm.
I've worked from home since 1999. You know what I mean?
Nice.
Before it was even a thing, and people would always say, "Well, how do you what's your discipline around it?" I'm like, "Well, I'm an entrepreneur, so I just get up and I'm automatically disciplined." But just to get back to that for a minute, just because you need to grow and you're hitting the ceiling and somebody tells you need to grow and you get out your org chart and you've just answered the question about how you fund it, like that's daunting. That doesn't confer on you any ability to be a good hirer, to be a good leader, to be a good
Mm.
boss. So it almost like you start hiring and now you need to start hiring people to manage the hires. So how did you, so that's the first part of the growth, is hiring a few people to relieve you guys, but then you need to hire more people to manage those people or as you grow. It's a lot of people don't get beyond that, executive assistant. What conferred on you the leadership skills and the hiring skills to get over that first phase of growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned it earlier that I am obsessed with learning and growing, and so is
Yeah.
Kathy. So, I read 2 to 3 business books every month. And I don't just read them, I study them, I highlight them, I mark them up. I got one sitting right next to me here. It's got like, I'll post-it notes all over it. And so I do a deep dive on it. And so often, these business greats, these business leaders, people who've scaled their companies and everything, they take all this lifetime of knowledge and they boil it down into a $20 book, and you
Right.
can get so much from that. So I've learned so much from leadership, from reading books, from like virtual mentors, if you will. Um, One of the greatest books that I read in that area that you're talking about, David, is called Multipliers. Subtitle of that is How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter. And so
Wow.
it's about being a multiplier, not being a detractor where you're like looking over someone's shoulder, telling them how to do things,
Yep.
micromanaging. It really taught me how to empower people and how to make the people that work for us smarter and better and help them grow. And then that gets carried down, that you lead by example. The people on our team, they get into that same mindset, and they're empowering their people. They're asking them to set their 3 big goals for the quarter, and then they're holding them accountable to those goals. But we have a team of inspired leaders at Real Wealth. That's the way I like to look at it. They don't need me to be looking over their shoulder. They don't need me to say like, did you do this? It's like
Right.
they have their goals, they're making it happen, and they take ownership for their role, and they take
Yeah.
ownership for the companies.
As a spectator to your life, Rich, I can tell you that I personally saw a great deal of growth after you guys started. I guess you read Traction by Gino Wickman. I'm
Hmm.
assuming, I think we may have discussed it in the past, but if we haven't, and I know that you implemented their EOS system behind that shortly thereafter reading Traction. Can you
Yeah.
tell me because I can see, having worked with your company for many, many years, there's definitely a before and after EOS. I don't know if
Agreed.
would you agree with me?
I do 100%. Before Traction, we had read a lot of Jim Collins' works, Good to Great, Beyond
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship, a lot of Vern Harnish's works, Rockefeller Habits, Scaling Up, a lot of these great stuff. And so we got tons of amazing lessons from those books and implemented those, and those really helped us grow. Traction came along, and Traction, Gino Wickman kind of took the best of the best. He took stuff from Jim Collins and Patrick Lencioni and Vern Harnish and Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach,
Yeah.
which all the lessons that Kathy and I learned, but he put them together into a system that you can follow, a business operating system, he calls it. And so, yeah, you're spot on, David. It's like having that system of like, oh, this is the way we do it. This is our system at our company, and everyone gets aligned around that. So everyone gets trained on the system. Everyone's following the same system. Then you don't have someone over here running their meetings a certain way and someone else a different
Right.
way, someone else setting, 10 goals for the quarter instead of just three. So yeah, that was an amazing, I think I read that in 2015. It was fairly a newer book, and yeah, I was all in. Yeah, once I read that, then I got his other book called Get a Grip, which is like a parable on how to implement it all. Then we hired Dan Coleman, who is our implementer. He's an EOS trained implementer. He helped run our meetings, our annual meetings, our quarterly meetings. So yeah, it. It was huge. It really transformed our business.
Can you kind of give, because I think a lot of people are familiar with EOS that are probably listening to this podcast, but have they read Traction? Have they read Rocket Fuel? Maybe they read it. And a lot of times it's like anything when you read a book, right? You read a book and it's relating to where you're at in your stage of your career, like today, right? Not 5 years ago and not 5 years in the future. So you may read Traction today and it may mean something totally different than 5 years into the future, right?
Yeah.
Kind of give us a feel, for folks listening as to, what are some of like the big points that you were able to take away from EOS that really helped to kind of expedite your guys' journey at Real Wealth?
For sure. Yeah. So EOS is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. That's what it stands for. And so it's that system. So the business system. So some of the biggest things for us is this whole kind of the cycle, the way it's timed, and everything's in quarterlies, and in a 90-minute, you have 90-minute meetings once a week, and those build into your 90-minute, into your every 90 days, setting new goals for your quarter. And then starting the year with that 2-day planning meeting. So like we have one coming up here in January where we're going to take 2 days. We'll be at our house here in Malibu with our whole leadership team. We're going to look at last year, what worked, what didn't work, were we on track with things or off? And then we're going to carry that forward into where do we want to be in 10 years? Where do we want to be in 3 years? And then what needs to happen in 2025? So coming up with those big rocks or goals for the year, and each quarter, then we'll say, okay, so what are we going to do in Q1? So just having all that all kind of starts with the big funnel of the big vision, and then that comes down to the annual goals, and that breaks down to quarterlies. Then everyone knows to be super focused every quarter. And the cool thing is every week where we have this 90-minute meeting and we're looking at what are your big three goals for this quarter? Are you on track or off track? We discuss it. And that's been the biggest thing for us is everyone's aligned. It's about communication. Is when you get more than 3 or 4 people in your company, that's when the communication starts to break down. And so when you have a system for communication where everyone is completely up to date, they know where they are, they know what's working, what's not, who needs support, shit gets done.
Shit
I,
gets done.
I, I know that just listening to that, Rich, like it really sounds like it helps to create, it sounds like your employees are being heard. You keep saying, what is it that they want, right? What do they want for their company? I'm sure there's a lot of what do they want for themselves personally in terms of self-development. And I think that breeds really, really high quality culture. And I think it's very, very difficult to quantify, right? Like you said, hey, I'm going to hire someone for 50 grand and I need 150 worth of revenue at a minimum to justify it, right? It's kind of
Hmm.
easy to understand. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out, but it's very hard for you to be able to say, well, we've got great culture or we don't have great culture. And I know
Yeah.
that David and I have both worked with a lot of people on your team throughout the years, and I've noticed that people are like happy. They're smiling, they're
Mm.
and usually when people are happy and smiling, it's because they feel good about their job. They feel like they're being heard. Do you attribute a lot of the EOS to being able to help, start, you have your meeting in January and it's the kind of the big send off meeting for the year to set the tone, right? Do you attribute a lot of the EOS to the culture? Because not a lot of people talk about it, right? We're always talking about KPIs, how many deals are you doing or, this or that or metrics, but it's hard to throw culture into an Excel spreadsheet and see how that works together. But you guys you and Kathy have really done a great job of building that culture. And I'm just curious how it is that you attribute to it, the culture with EOS and maybe some other things.
Yeah, I think it even started before EOS. EOS has been great for the communication and structure, culture has always been huge for me. So I started a health club in Boston when I was 23, and I ran that until I was 30. And we went from a team of three partners to 23 employees. And
Wow.
in that, we had a great culture, and people still talk about it today, what the culture was like. For me, it came down to exactly what you just said, Clark, was communication and people being heard.
Yeah.
And so, what I would always do and still do today is each person who reports to someone has a quarterly conversation with that person. So, with our leadership team, we have four people on our leadership team. Each quarter, I sit down with them for like an hour one-on-one. And in that, it's not about a performance evaluation. It's how are you feeling about your role? What do you love about your role? Is there anything that's frustrating you? Is there anyone on our team that's frustrating you? Um, Another question I always ask is, where do you see yourself in 3 years at Real Wealth? Do you still see yourself employed here? If so, are you in the same role? Have you expanded your role? Have you elevated? Um, all that stuff. So I think for that, it's like really a heart to heart using coaching skills and asking people questions and then keeping my mouth shut and listen to them and find out where they are. So just like you said, it's like people feel heard
Yeah.
and we address things um, almost immediate. Like for example, you guys know Maggie, who's on our team. Years ago, I was having a conversation with her, and I said, "Where do you see yourself in 3 years?" She goes, "Well, I'm not sure if I'll still be at Real Wealth because I want to travel the world. I want to go to all these different countries." And I was like, "Whoa, okay, I didn't even know that. Let's see if we can do this. Let's see if we can." Have you be a digital nomad where you can travel the
Yeah.
world and still do your job. And so we did that for her. It worked out
Wow.
great. She did that. She still travels all over the world. But that was also the spark, David, who that turned us into a remote company. We had an office up in Walnut Creek in the San Francisco Bay Area. There was 7 offices in there. Everyone would come into the office. But after that, with Maggie and she went on the road, after a while, we started hiring people around the country and saying like, "Oh, you don't have to come into the office," because we just wanted to hire someone who's a real specialist. And we'll say you can be remote. And after a while, we're like, "Why are we keeping this office?" And in 2011, that's when we went 100% remote. So because of that conversation with Maggie and finding out her dream and what she wanted and trying to make that work for her, that ended up making our company incredible, being a remote place. And now we have people from all over the country working for us.
That's gold, by the way. Just incredible. Thank you for that, Rich. I'm
Yeah.
just enthralled listening to you. Literally, you could keep on going for quite a long time, but we're going to get timed out. Rich, I want to move on. We just talked about that you can buy these great business books, and for $20, you can get all of this in, you know, a life's work for 20 bucks, written
Right.
by reasonably intelligent people. And so
Hmm.
you have sat down, and again, I know Kathy's journey is so different than your journey, and we say Real Wealth Network. Well, Real Wealth Network is a lot of things. It's a lot of moving parts, and
Yeah.
I know from spending hundreds of hours in Kathy's company and a lot of hours in your company. I know how different you are, and I know how different the roles are as well. But you've come together, and you've written, and you put all of your life experiences into this book, Scaling Smart. And I
Hmm.
know the book pretty much digs into four kind of core principles. Start off with you, right? But
Hmm.
I want you to, I'll name them, and then I want you to just touch on these things if you don't mind, right?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
but I know you're a systems guy, and so you can say focus on systems and not just growth, right? So you just hit on it real quick. Like build the systems, the growth will come, right?
Yeah.
Build a strong team and delegate effectively. I think these are, big part of your book. Embrace automation and technology. We haven't hit on that so far. And so I really, really want to hear what you have to say on that. And then know your metrics and data type of thing, like know where you're going and why you're going there. This is all within Scaling Smart. Can you tell me your version of the core route that Scaling Smart covers, so that the listeners can go out and buy it and get it or download it or listen to it on Audible right away?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it definitely starts with what about you? Like, if you're going to be growing and scaling this business, what's your why? What do you see in the future for yourself? It's like starting there before you go into this, scaling mode, really about growing your company. Whereas not just about growth, it's about, scaling is where your company continues to grow and expand your revenue, but your expenses aren't keeping up at that same pace. You kind of try to, when you really want to scale, you want to keep your expenses where they are or have them go up a little bit. And, maybe your expenses go up 20%, 30%, but you want to be scaling at 60 or 70 or 80%. So that's, I just want to put that out there first about the difference between scaling and just growth. There's a lot of
Right.
people out there who throw a lot of money on it and they overhire and they grow themselves broke. So
Yeah,
we didn't want people
I've
to do
seen it.
that.
I've seen
So
that a
then
lot.
the second phase of it is what about your company? So it's like, yeah, your vision's important. This is what you want for yourself, but what about your company? And people aren't going to be excited about your personal vision of like, I want to make this much money. They're say, what about us? What about me? So that's where we talk about the importance of having a purpose. What's your company about? How do you really help people? We're about helping people create real wealth, so they have the money and the freedom to live life on their own terms. That's our purpose. So people get aligned around that. The profit sharing, the giving back 10% of our profits to charity, all that stuff is about the company and how can you better serve your customers. And then it goes into the people. So, you know, we have the saying at Real Wealth, the only thing more important than a great idea is the team that can see it through. Because we have
Mm-hmm.
all these great ideas, but if you don't have the right team, it's just not
Yeah.
going to happen. So there's a whole section, and like I think there's 4 chapters just on people, managing people, inspiring people, how to get people all kind of rowing the boat in the same direction, as I said earlier. How to have autonomy and have people to be inspired. We talk about those quarterly conversations and all. And then it goes into the last section of the book is called Let's Get Nerdy. And that's when we get nerdy about systems and processes and technology. And so that is kind of like use how the people on your team and you can best use technology using hiring specialists and experts in their chosen area, hiring them as independent contractors if you can, or sometimes hiring a firm like, we have a professional employment organization to handle all our HR and payroll. We have an outsourced CFO company that gives us guidance on, instead of hiring a full-time chief financial officer, we can have one who's experienced, who's worked with hundreds of companies before, guide us at a fraction of the cost. And then going into the systems and processes about having everything in your company documented. Each person who is following any type of process, whether it be sales or marketing or manufacturing or anything delivering, it's have them create a clear documented process from step 1, step 2, step 3. One of the best ways to do that is have that all contained in some type of digital holding system where, especially if it's video based, where someone could go in, you get a new hire, or someone has to go on what just happened with us, maternity leave for a couple months, to be able to say, hey, this person's going to be away for a while. We hire someone new. Here's all the documented processes. This is the way we do it
Yeah.
at Real Wealth.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the basic sections of the book, the premise.
It's
Um,
invaluable. It's
yeah,
invaluable. If anyone wants to grow a business and they don't want to grow themselves into, crazy town, like they've got to pick up this
exactly. Yeah.
book. You know what? We're going to start running out of time, Rich, but I'm not letting you go until we talk about what's the core technology that you think have moved the needle for you. If there was one thing I could take away, you're like, no, 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 we need that.
Mm.
What is that one thing? What is that one piece of tech that you're like, I got to keep that.
I'm going to share 2 if that's okay.
Please.
No
The
rules, Rich.
first that we've used for years is a project management software called Basecamp. So there's other ones. There's like Asana is a great
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
There's some great ones, but we've
Yeah.
used Basecamp for years, and it's this central hub that organizes things where people can message within it. They can message back and forth. You can create to-dos for someone and explain the to-do fully, whether you can upload documents to that to-do to show people something. So we manage all our projects in Basecamp. So that's been amazing. And then the second one that stands out is a software we use called 90.io. So spelled out NINETY.io. And that is a system for running EOS or whatever operating
Mm.
system you use. And that works incredibly well. We lead our meetings through it. We open up 90, and in that you can, during that meeting, you can add your issues to discuss. In those issues, when you're discussing them on the meeting, you can click and make something a to do and assign it to someone. And then the next week when you meet, oh, that's right there in the software. It's like, oh, you took these 4 to-dos. Did you get them done? If not, what happened? What support do you need? What issues do we have going on now? Is there anything new? So anyway, 90.io is great for kind of like managing your whole team and making sure everyone's communicating and connecting in one central hub.
That's
I, I,
invaluable.
yeah, I think Rich, I mean, there's so many gold nuggets in scaling smart. And, there's so many people out there that are, trying to swing for the fences, right? They're trying to build companies. They're trying to, whether it's e-commerce or whether it's retail or whatever it is, right? And so I think that it's imperative to be able to your point, to be able to take all this knowledge and squeeze it into one book, to be able to go on Audible and just drive down the road and listen to all of these tips. I mean, if you, everyone needs to go out, stop listening to this right now and go out and buy the book, buy it on Audible. That's how I listen to all my things.
Mm.
Rich, before we finish out, I want to leave on a little bit of a lighter note. As we were digging into the internet and Google trying to find out, who is this Rich guy, right? We think we know him, but then we find out that Rich, you were on the freaking X Games. You were like it literally on the X Games. We found out that you were I don't know if you are or you were at some point a record holding bungee jumper. You've got to be able to give the listener a little bit of insight as to who. I'm assuming that's not the Rich today that has the bungee jump record. That may have been a few years ago, but talk to us a little bit about that part of your life. That is super freaking cool. We don't interview a lot of people that are on X Games. Talk to us about that, Rich. Take us out on that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was an early addiction. I was, as far early as 6 years old, where I'd like to climb a tree as high as I could and then dangle from one hand from a branch. My mom didn't like it too much, but it was like just had that addiction for the adrenaline, the rush, and the thrill. So it went from there to skiing with my younger brother. We started to challenge each other to jump off bigger and bigger cliffs. And that carried over to my younger brother started to bungee jump here in California. So I'd come out and jump with him, and we did some pretty wild things. We did the Golden Gate Bridge one night at midnight. We all were black and snuck out there, and probably get shot doing that today. But we jumped Golden Gate Bridge. We jumped off Forest Hill Bridge, which is the highest bridge on the West Coast. It's 730 feet. And we still hold the record for we're the only people, my brother and I, to bungee jump off Half Dome in Yosemite. So where Half Dome hangs over a little bit over the valley floor, 5,000 feet below, we went up there and we rigged up a system and we jumped off Half Dome with a bungee cord and a couple other things in the X Games. So we were invited to compete in the first X Games. The first 2 years they had bungee jumping, which is kind of like a high diving competition. How many flips you can get off the platform?
Yeah.
It was a 160-foot crane. How
Oh my
many
God.
flips and spins on the rebound? So best form and everything. The Canadian diving team kicked our butts on that one. They got first, second, and third place. But it was awesome to be able to compete and be around all those athletes in the X Games was awesome. So yeah, it's just I don't know. It's all in Kathy and I are certified skydivers. We used to go out and skydive together. We had a whole routine we would do together in the air and do 360s and then come together and kiss each other. And
Oh, that's
so
cool.
it's just I don't know. It's an addiction. I don't know if it's a positive one or not, but I'm still here.
Well, I can tell you it's a positive one. Rich, I have had really honestly, it's the honor of spending quite a lot of time with you guys personally at your houses and having gone, attended a lot of mastermind with you as a couple. And you're really unique. I know
Mm.
you know, I know because I've spoken to a lot of people who've spent time with you guys when I was there, when I wasn't there. And there's something very, very unique about you and Kathy, about your, I think it's your generosity. I really
Mm.
do. I think that that might be at the core of what makes you guys very different.
Oh,
I've
thank
never
you.
seen you lose your shit. I've never seen you be greedy. You've only ever been generous and kind. And I
Wow.
think that that is why people want to show up and perform for you too. If that's conscious or subconscious or some kind of, you know, grand plan, I don't think so. I just think it's natural. I think it's in your soul. And I think
Hmm.
it's in
Thank you.
Kathy's soul as well. And I think that
Yeah,
that's
that's awesome.
really, on top of being a serious person, you're obviously very, you know, thrill seeker person as well. But I think as I finish up here, I would say that's the core thing. If I were to, summarize you, it wouldn't be, Real Wealth Network. It's amazing. It wouldn't be the books, it wouldn't be the authoring, it wouldn't be the money you've made, it wouldn't be the teams you've built. It may be for you, but for me, it would be just your kindness and generosity and how you
Ah,
have impacted so many people's lives, consciously or subconsciously.
wow. Thank you. I mean, thank you for that's an awesome acknowledgement. And that personal development workshop that Kathy and I met in, they had a saying called givers gain. And
Yep.
they're like, the more you give, the more you're going to gain in your life. And I took that to heart. I mean, I think we both came into that workshop as givers wanting to give, but that's like that amplified it. So we're always looking at everything, our purpose of real wealth and how can we better serve people? How can we give? So thank you. Thank you for that
Yeah.
acknowledgement. I appreciate it.
On your way out the door, Rich, can we ask you what the future holds for you, Kathy, Real Wealth Network? I know that you have essentially brought yourself to the point where you've replaced everything in your world. I don't know if there's a task left in Real Wealth Network that you haven't replaced yourself with other than the word leader. Can I ask you guys what the future might hold for you guys as a last word on this topic?
Well, the first thing that comes up to me just instant is being awesome grandparents. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we have a 5-year-old grandson, a 1-year-old granddaughter, and so being awesome grandparents means not only giving to them and making their life awesome, but also just walking the talk, you know, being in incredible physical shape, being able to surf with our great grandkids when we're 100 years old is one of our
Yes.
goals.
Yes.
So that's been the focus is like we've really shifted into now that we have a self-managing business, we're really focused on being professional investors, and that's not only with real estate,
Yeah.
working that, but investing into our health, investing into our family, friendships, and all that stuff. So that's next level for us.
I love it, Rich. That really hits home, right? It's like, why do we do these things? Why are we building these systems? Why are we building these businesses? There's a bigger purpose out there, right? It's not to make X amount of money because what are you going to do with that money? And it sounds like you've been able to kind of truly achieve the goal that a lot of investors talk about, right? It's financial freedom, freedom of time. So I tip my cap to you and Kathy, and that's such a great thing that I think a lot of people listening to this, we're all striving to do. And it's not about material things, right? It's about spending time with family. It's about being healthy, right? So that's amazing. With that, I think David, if you have anything else, it's been amazing, Rich, having you on. We hope you're safe. We hope all your neighbors and we're all thinking about you here
Thank you.
with all the the tragedies going on. But hopefully this community is going to come together and everyone's going to build back. And with that, Rich, we really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. It's great. Love to being here with you guys.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Look, we truly appreciate your support and hope you found the conversation insightful and engaging and useful. If you enjoy the show, because there's a lot of shows out there, would you please take a moment to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform? Your feedback helps us grow and reach more listeners. And if we reach more listeners, we will have bigger and more interesting guests. So don't miss the show. Please go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. We hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats Wealth podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at contact@burnyourboatswealth.com burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats Wealth podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you and have a great day.